Do you know that habits are extremely powerful? Wow, more powerful than you never believe. Today we're going to be talking about some really bad money habits that are keeping you poor. Stay tuned. Hey, Frank Thomas here from Wealth Generation Strategies, and today we're going to be talking about the topic of money habits that are keeping you poor. Yes, there are things that you're doing, they're literally habits. You need to realize that a habit is something that you do without even thinking about it. That's what makes habits so insidious. Is you will do things and not even think about it and wonder why your situation isn't changing. You're 20 years old and you think, wow, one day I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be rich. Woo! Look out. And you hit 30 and you kind of go, whoa, what's happening here? I'm not rich. So, well, it's got to be the darn government's fault. Or it's got to be, oh, my boss, he's not giving me a raise. Or it's got to be something. And then you get into your 40s and you start to think, wow, maybe I'm the problem. Well, it's taken me almost to 60 to realize that yes, I am the problem, and it's the habits that I've formed over the years that are the biggest problem. So let's talk about those habits. I got 5 for you today that I think if you can tackle these 5 in your life, you can make a world of difference in your future financial situation. So let's get started here. Number 1, and I think this is a biggie because this is one that, boy, I can talk a whole hour on this topic. I'm not going to, but I can. And that is taking on debt because it's okay. We're comfortable with it. Hey, yeah, it's okay. Credit cards right in there. Lump it right in there because credit cards are debt. And debt is anything that you go and spend that you've not paid cash for. You use credit for it on the pretense that one day in the future you're going to pay for it. And you got to always remember that. You got to pay for it eventually. It's not a get out of jail free card like a Monopoly. It doesn't exist. Getting comfortable with debt is very dangerous. I got so comfortable with debt for so many years in my life that I carried tremendous amounts of debt. And what happens is you'll carry more and more and more debt, and you got to service that debt. You think to yourself, oh, it's only an extra $100 a month. It's not really a big deal. And you tack it on as another expense. Oh, it's only another $250 a month. And you tack it on. Before you know it, you got nothing left. And honestly, I don't know if you've ever done it, but I remember before I sold my house that I was in previously, if I had $200 at the end of the at the end of the month, and this is not having any spending money, I had no spending money. If I had $200 at the end of the month, it was amazing because we were carrying so much debt, and I knew that this had to stop. So, in my opinion, one of the biggest money habits that keep you poor is willing to accept taking on more debt. You got to get uncomfortable with having debt. Debt is not your friend. Okay, number 2. And this kind of goes hand in hand with taking on debt. Paying yourself first. People who are poor pay themselves last. Again, I'm very guilty of this. For years and years and years, I always paid myself for what was left over. Now, let me tell you a little trick or a little secret. And again, this is another spending habit. Our income and our expenses will rise together. They always do. As your income goes up, your expenses will go up to match and rise, if not exceed your income. You will find it, honestly and truthfully. No matter how much you make, I remember when I was making, this was years ago, we were making about $32,000, $33,000 a year. And then I got a raise for $60,000. And because I got some certifications. That's a different video. We'll talk about that in the future here. But I got this certification, and all of a sudden I was worth a lot more in the workplace. And my wife and I thought we were on top of the world. Wow, we were like, wow, look at this, man. And the funny thing was, it didn't take a year before we were spending $60,000 a year. It's funny how you can live off of one and then all of a sudden live off of something new. The real trick here is learning how to pay yourself first. And the idea behind paying yourself first, and you could say to me, Frank, how am I supposed to do that? I barely make it to the end of the month. And that's the whole reason why I gave you the story of our expenses rising up to our income. If we make paying ourselves first a priority and a line item expense in our budget, yes, I did say the budget word. When we make it a line item in our budget, then what happens is, in the beginning, yeah, you might feel it and you might feel the squeak for the first few months, but you get used to it. And whether you know it or not, you unconsciously start to save. So you need to start paying yourself first. That leads me into point number 3. And you need to establish an emergency fund. When you start paying yourself first, one of the first things you want to do is you want to establish an emergency fund. At the bare minimum, it's $1,000. And then that fund is not there for, oh, the new iPhone came out. No, it's called an emergency fund for a reason. It's there when you have a legitimate emergency, and life is full of emergencies. And let me tell you, I find that I have a major emergency once every year or two that's going to cost me $1,000 or more dollars. So that emergency fund is there for that very reason. I would dare say having an emergency fund of up to 6 months of your living expenses is very wise. If you can save 6 months of your living expenses, wow, you're ahead of the game. You can lose your job and find another better, higher paying job in those 6 months because you have the funds to cover you. Nobody's going to cover your butt if you find yourself out of work. And that's happening nowadays, and it's not a cool thing. But if you have an emergency fund in place, then you are covered for those rough storms when they come. Let's get to point number 4 here. Number 4 is having no idea where your money is going. And this is a big one. Unfortunately, it comes down to getting comfortable with writing a budget. I've heard people say that you need to re-look at your budget every 2 to 3 months. And I don't disagree. I think it's a brilliant idea. Once you establish a budget, and it's really easy. I've actually created a video recently that talks about building a budget really easily. If you go and create that budget and you start following it, first of all, a few things happen. You know what you paid and you know what you haven't paid. That's the second thing. And the third thing is, if somebody tries to pull one over you, you can see it right away. It jumps right out at you. I had that happen recently. The electric company tried to charge me 3 times the rate. Now, it was pretty big difference. I went from having to pay maybe $100 a month to paying $500 a month. And I went, whoa, something's wrong here. And I could have had the wool pulled over my eyes. But if I wasn't managing my money, if I didn't have a budget, if I didn't know what bills are supposed to come out and when they're supposed to come out, I'd have no stinking idea that happened. So it's really important to have an idea where your money's going. And it unfortunately comes down to building a budget. Hey, have you subscribed yet? Before we get to our bonus, and it's a good bonus, this to me is probably the most important point, so you got to stick around for the bonus. But before you get to the bonus, let's just take a moment. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If you have subscribed, thank you. And make sure you like this video if you think you're going to get value from it. That's really important. And the videos where I get lots of subscribers and lots of likes, man, I get a ton of syndication from YouTube, and I get my information out to more people to help more people just like you. So thank you so much. Let's get to our bonus though. This is a hard one to describe, and it's all about prioritizing in your mind long-term savings. It's really hard to wrap around in your mind a long-term goal. It's a tough thing for a lot of people. I really take my hat off to the Japanese. The Japanese learn how to make business plans 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 50 years into the future. They're looking deep into the future, and they're making their business plans for today based on what could happen in 50 years. Now, it gets a little dark, a little shady, it's a little hard to see it that far out. But the truth of the matter is, you have to become really good at seeing the long term. How do you do that? What you got to do is, first of all, do everything I've already talked about today. Once you start paying yourself first and start establishing an emergency fund and start putting it away into an investment account, you start to see it grow, and you start to think, hey, what would happen if with interest this gets bigger? You know, what could that do for me? It's really incredible what a long-term money plan can do. Let me give you an example. Years ago, I remember I got a bonus. I got a bonus check for $5,000 from the company I was working with. They were like, we're going to give you a $5,000 bonus. I'd like to know if you want to just put it into your RSP or you want it to just pay it out to you, or what do you want to do? Because I didn't really have that long-term mindset in place. I was like, give me the money, baby. I'm going to go spend it. I know exactly what I'm going to buy. And my wife and I lined up a whole bunch of purchases, probably about $50,000 worth of purchases that we were going to spend on this $5,000. I got my paycheck and I just about had a breakdown. I got like about $2,700. And I was like, hey, what happened? Oh, you got to pay the government. Whenever you get a big bonus, what happens is that extra money, they're going to take more off and you got to pay the government first. They're going to get paid first. I learned a really hard lesson that day. I was like, oh, that really sucks. Like I was expecting this big amount of money. And in the end, all we ended up doing was paying some debt off on our credit cards because, of course, I was comfortable with credit. So it's kind of funny how these kind of go hand in hand, eh? Get into prioritizing, looking and building that mindset, that idea of saving for the long term. Because, hey, aren't you hoping to live that long, or are you hoping to die in a year or two? But if you're hoping to live for the next 30, 40, 50 years, then hey, you need to plan for those 40, 50 years like the Japanese do. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I have another video showing up right now that it talks all about really easy budgeting tips. Now, if you're serious about the points I've talked to you about today, go over and check out that video because it's going to give you more detailed plans on how you can budget easily. I've tried to make it so easy that it's literally effortless. So go over and check it out. We'll see you there. And thanks for joining me today. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.